going on, everyone? My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can, of course, just call me Juice, because that is my nickname. Welcome, everyone, to the Juice Alert, episode number 56 for you ladies and gentlemen out there. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can, of course, find this show right here on YouTube, as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. If you're listening to this show right here on YouTube, if you're feeling kind, be sure to leave this video, or I should say this episode, a like. It definitely helps me out right here on the show. And also, if you're feeling kind and you listen on podcasting platforms, be sure to leave me a good rating and review. Like I said, those things definitely help me out right here on the show today. We are diving into the AFC North division. So the division with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns, and of course the Cincinnati Bengals. Four very, very interesting teams. We have a lot of great topics to talk about today. We're going to talk about Dwayne Haskins and if he truly is the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers at quarterback once Ben Roethlisberger potentially retires. We'll also talk about Ben Roethlisberger. Is Ben Roethlisberger an all-time great quarterback? I say no to that statement right there. I'm going to tell you why I believe Ben Roethlisberger is not quite an all-time great quarterback. I will also talk about Baker Mayfield, Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow. A lot of great things to talk about right here. But before I do start off the show, I just want to say you guys can follow me on social media. My Instagram account is GHIMAN_MCKINNEY. And my Twitter account is at GHIMANMCKINNEY. I'm always on social media. I love to chat with you guys about some of the things that I have to say on the show. I love to hear some of you guys' opinions about the topics that I cover. And also, if you want to get specific updates regarding this show, the Juice Alert, you can follow the Juice Alert both on Twitter and Instagram. The Twitter account is at the Juice Alert, and the Instagram account is the Juice Alert _. But without further ado, let's jump right into this show. I'm very excited for this show. A lot of great things, like I said, I'm going to be talking about today. I want to kick things off by talking about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. You know, the question everyone really wants to know is, can Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens organization when it's all said and done? You know, Lamar Jackson's a very polarizing player. There are some people out there that believe he's really, really good, and rightfully so, because he's been a very successful quarterback up to this point. But some people think that he deserves to be in the category with Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Some Ravens fans have even told me he's better than Patrick Mahomes. And I disagree with those people. I think that those people are overrating Lamar Jackson a little bit. Not that Lamar Jackson's a bad quarterback. He's really, really good. But I don't think he's quite on the level of a Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. Meanwhile, you have some people out there that just flat out refuse to give Lamar Jackson any type of credit. They always talk about how the coaching staff, the run game, the defense is the reason why the Ravens are winning. Some people out there think Lamar Jackson stinks, that he's overrated. And I've even had some people in the past tell me that they would rather have Sam Darnold over Lamar Jackson. Now, obviously, I think that those people would rather change their opinions now today because that was several years ago. But several years ago, you heard some scouts, you know, even when Lamar Jackson was coming out of college, a lot of people had Sam Darnold rated over Lamar Jackson when Sam Darnold was coming out of USC and Lamar Jackson was coming out of Louisville. And, you know, I understood it, but I was never the biggest Sam Darnold fan. So, you know, some of those evaluators of talent have to eat crow. Here's the thing. I'm going to be the guy that brings a reasonable, objective opinion about Lamar Jackson because that's what I do here on the show. I'm the guy that guides you to the right path regarding these opinions and these takes and evaluations on quarterbacks. So I'm going to give an honest and fair assessment about Lamar Jackson, okay? I'm not a Ravens fan, but I do think I can be fair right here, okay? I believe, based on what I've seen, Lamar Jackson is a legitimate long-term franchise quarterback. And not just like an average quarterback. I think he's really, really good. And you can make the argument that right now, he's a great franchise quarterback. I could get behind that right away. In fact, I believe you can win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson as your starting quarterback And quite frankly, over the next 5 to 10 years, I believe at some point Lamar Jackson will lead the Baltimore Ravens to another Super Bowl championship win. I believe in Lamar Jackson, and I believe eventually once his career is over with, he'll probably have a Super Bowl victory and a Super Bowl MVP next to his name. Like I said, I don't put Lamar Jackson in the category with Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, and even Deshaun Watson. 4 of those quarterbacks have been to and won Super Bowls and have had much more postseason success. And while Deshaun Watson hasn't quite had the postseason success of a Tom Brady or a Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson to me is just a guy that can carry a team and put them on his back. I understand he did not win a whole lot of games with the Houston Texans this past year, but I think he's a better pure passer than Lamar Jackson. And I think there's a little bit of an it factor to Deshaun Watson. Not saying Lamar doesn't have an it factor, but Deshaun Watson has not been blessed with being drafted to a well-run organization like Lamar Jackson, and he's putting up Lamar Jackson type numbers. I think if you put a real team around Deshaun Watson, he's going to be real. He has a chance to become an all-time great quarterback. But if you were to tell me that you think that Lamar Jackson is better than Deshaun Watson today, I'm not going to be completely mad at you, because I think both are great quarterbacks. I really do. I think Lamar Jackson is not quite in a tier 1 quarterback yet, just because I like to see more postseason success. But I do think Lamar Jackson can get to that point. And when we look at these quarterbacks, outside of Mahomes, Rodgers, Wilson, Brady, and maybe Deshaun Watson, I think right now, today, I'd take Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen. Josh Allen's had one great season up to this point. A couple of years ago, Josh Allen threw more interceptions than touchdowns his rookie season. Lamar Jackson was lighting the world on fire his rookie season. He's been a much more consistent quarterback than Josh Allen up to this point. I need another year from Josh Allen. You look at Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert was excellent his rookie year. But when we talk about Lamar Jackson's won over 70% of his games. We're talking about a league MVP right here. I think we'd be being prisoners of the moment if we put Justin Herbert over Lamar Jackson automatically right now. You look at Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray has a chance to become better than Lamar Jackson. Both are very similar players, but Kyler Murray hasn't even gotten his team to the playoffs yet. There's still a lot Kyler Murray has to prove. You look at Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott over the past couple of years, the past 2 to 3 seasons, his record versus teams above 500 is awful. He's not as talented as Lamar Jackson, hasn't even been the MVP conversation, and let alone won a league MVP like Lamar Jackson. Dak hasn't been in the MVP conversation consistently. You look at Baker Mayfield, a guy that was in the same draft class as Lamar Jackson. Baker Mayfield, I like Baker Mayfield, but are we forgetting that a year ago Baker Mayfield looked awful when he was asked to put the Cleveland Browns on his back? I get it, bad coaching staff, bad offensive line, but Lamar Jackson literally is the Baltimore Ravens offense. He is the run game. He is the dynamic passer that they need. If you take Lamar Jackson away from the Ravens, that offense totally changes. And the Cleveland Browns this past year became a run-first team. When Baker Mayfield threw the ball less, the Browns won more games. So, let's pause with Baker Mayfield a little bit. You look at Carson Wentz a couple of years ago. Eagles fans were claiming that Carson Wentz was a better pure passer than Lamar Jackson. A lot of those guys are eating crow today. It's ironic because everyone thinks Lamar Jackson's going to get hurt, but Carson Wentz, the traditional pocket passer, is the one out here getting hurt. We're 3 years into Lamar Jackson's career, people. Okay? Lamar Jackson, 3 years in, has a 30-7 career record. 30 wins, 7 losses. And 3 of those 7 losses have been to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, who really, outside of Tampa Bay, no one has figured out how to slow down Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs consistently. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did it in the Super Bowl, but everyone was pretty surprised about that. You know what I'm saying? You look at Lamar Jackson, great record so far, has a career pass rating over 100. He's won a league MVP up to this point. He's also led the league in touchdown passes. So for the people out there saying Lamar Jackson isn't a great passer, I wholeheartedly disagree. The statistics show he's a great passer. He led the league in touchdown passes a year ago. For a guy that's quote-unquote a running back or a run-first quarterback, how come he was able to lead the entire league in touchdown passes when Aaron Rodgers was healthy, Tom Brady was healthy, Patrick Mahomes was playing? Out of all those guys, you know who was the number one quarterback as far as touchdown passes? The year Lamar Jackson won MVP was Lamar Jackson. Okay, and not to mention, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. From a game plan standpoint, if I was a defensive coordinator, Lamar Jackson would keep me up at night and give me nightmares because he's the greatest and most explosive, dynamic runner of the football at the quarterback position we've ever seen. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you have to throw the football to be a great quarterback. Quite frankly, as long as you're moving the chains, I really don't care, okay? And I think Lamar Jackson is here to stay with his running ability because you just can't stop that guy. He's just so dynamic and so explosive as far as running the football that no one up to this point really has been able to figure out how to stop Lamar Jackson. And we talk about, him not being a precise passer. Well, for Lamar Jackson's career, he's completed 64% of his throws. Do you guys realize that Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, also has a career 64% completion percentage as far as his passes? Tom Brady, for his career, has completed 64% of his passes. And no one talks about how Tom Brady is not a precision passer or that he's not accurate. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson has the same completion percentage for his career. I'm not a big stats guy, but I really don't understand the Lamar Jackson criticism. And every single year up to this point, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have made the playoffs, and Lamar Jackson is still only 24 years old. The best version of Lamar Jackson has honestly yet to come. I think there's still a level that Lamar Jackson can tap into. I still believe there are some areas of his game he could get better in. I know people are going to say, well, Lamar Jackson, he hasn't played all that particularly well in the playoffs the last couple of years. I get it. But the first time he made the playoffs, it was his rookie season. And that was versus a very good Chargers defense, led by Derwin James and Joey Bosa. The Ravens really didn't have a whole lot of weapons for Lamar Jackson to throw to. I'll give him a pass for that. Now, the next year versus Tennessee, I get it. It was a bad home loss, but the Ravens defense could not stop Derrick Henry. And once again, the Baltimore Ravens did not have explosive wide receivers and weapons to help bail Lamar Jackson out. The Baltimore Ravens are great when they're playing up in front of people with a lead where they can run the football, play great defense, run play action with Lamar Jackson. That game, they got behind the 8 ball, and the Titans spoiled their season. And then Lamar Jackson goes out there the very next year, this past year, wins a playoff game. He was excellent versus Tennessee, and then goes on the road versus Buffalo. And wide receivers were not getting open. They were dropping passes. The offensive line was not blocking. It was a very rainy day. Justin Tucker was missing field goals. It was going to be hard for any quarterback in that situation to thrive that day versus a very good Buffalo team. So I think that, look, Peyton Manning struggled for the first couple of years to win playoff games. I think eventually Lamar Jackson is going to get it, okay? I think that eventually things will start to break his way in the playoffs. And the Baltimore Ravens organization, they value the offensive line. They value the run game. The Ravens have always put a really good defense around Lamar Jackson. They've been good defensively for the past couple of years. Special teams, it matters to them. Having a great coaching staff. You look at John Harbaugh. And the Baltimore Ravens finally went big on wide receiver this past offseason, drafting Rashod Bateman, drafting Taylor Wallace, signing Sammy Watkins. They realized we got to get more dynamic. We have to be more dynamic than Kansas City and Buffalo. We have to put up some points. So they even went big on wide receiver. Okay? So, I think that eventually the Ravens, things will break their way in the playoffs. And as long as they're in the dance every single year, they're going to have a puncher's chance, okay? When you look at Lamar Jackson, now that the Ravens have put better wide receivers around him, I think you're going to start to see him continue to play at a high level, and Lamar Jackson has an incredible work ethic. He's the first guy in, last guy out, according to his coaches. He's got a really, good fluid throwing motion. It's not like Cam Newton, where Cam Newton had this kind of, awkward throwing motion. It always seemed like Cam Newton, never really fixed his mechanics. There's even today, Cam Newton's mechanics aren't all that great. I think Lamar Jackson is a more accurate quarterback than Cam Newton from an arm strength perspective, from a decision-making perspective, as far as Lamar Jackson's ability to process defenses quickly. He's got it all. And I know all of you are going to say, well, look at the flaws in his game. I'm sorry, people, but if you're looking for the perfect quarterback, that quarterback doesn't exist. Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers are the closest thing to a perfect quarterback, and even those guys have flaws. Okay, so I think Lamar Jackson's here to stay. And even if Lamar Jackson can't sustain this success that he's having for the next, 15 to 17 years, if he can sustain this level of play for the next 5 to 7 years, and the Ravens win a Super Bowl, it's 100% worth it. And I think Lamar Jackson, the sky's the limit for him, and we'll see what happens going forward. But I believe that Lamar Jackson can win you a Super Bowl if he's your starting quarterback. So I want to now shift to John Harbaugh. When it comes to John Harbaugh, I think that he's an underappreciated head coach. I'm a big believer in John Harbaugh. And when we talk about, quarterbacks, winning Super Bowls like Tom Brady, like Joe Montana, like Drew Brees, who won a Super Bowl, over a decade ago, the common denominator usually is those guys have really good coaches. You look at Tom Brady, he had Bill Belichick. You look at Joe Montana, he had Bill Walsh. You look at Drew Brees, he had Sean Payton, one of the greatest offensive minds of all time. That's why I'm confident that a guy like Lamar Jackson can win a Super Bowl, because he has a great head coach like John Harbaugh next to his side. And how could you not be a believer in John Harbaugh, people? I mean, for his career, he's won over 60% of his games. He has a 129 and 79 record. So that's 129 wins and 79 losses through 208 games that he's coached in Baltimore. He's won a Super Bowl. He's above 500 in the playoffs for his career. That's actually better than Mike Tomlin, who's at 500 in the playoffs for his career. Everyone talks about how great Mike Tomlin is. I don't think the gap between John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin is all that wide. Sure, I would think that Mike Tomlin's a better coach, but you look at John Harbaugh, I don't think the gap's that wide. John Harbaugh's won a Coach of the Year. He's above 500 in the playoffs, and John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco as a starting quarterback. Okay? You look at Andy Reid. Andy Reid couldn't win a Super Bowl until he got an all-time great talented quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. And for the most part, Joe Flacco hasn't been close to the level of a Ben Roethlisberger throughout his career, and that was who John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens have to always go up against in that division. Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben's going to go to the Hall of Fame. And as good as Joe Flacco was on the Super Bowl run, I don't think anyone's going to argue that Joe Flacco is the first ballot Hall of Famer. Once he got paid, he went into the tank, and Harbaugh was still able to win games with him. And people can say, oh, John Harbaugh, he's overrated. I think John Harbaugh's underrated, if anything, okay? I think John Harbaugh's underappreciated. Because here's the thing. When we look at guys like Kyle Shanahan, let's take him for an example. Kyle Shanahan is considered arguably the smartest offensive mind in all football right now today. If you're talking about an offensive genius, most people are going to point to Kyle Shanahan. Maybe they point to Sean McVay, but those are the two names you think of. Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. And Kyle Shanahan, as great as he is, you know how many winning seasons he's had up to this point through 4 years? One winning season. And you folks are out here telling me that guys like John Harbaugh are overrated when John Harbaugh, during his 13-year career as a head coach, has had one losing season. Think about that. Kyle Shanahan, arguably the greatest offensive mind in today's NFL, has one winning season in 4 years, and people think that he's an absolute genius, okay? And look, I like Sean McDermott. I like Sean McVay. I like those guys. But those guys haven't even won a Super Bowl. And like I said earlier, John Harbaugh's had to drag Joe Flacco for the most part throughout his career, alongside of him. And Joe Flacco had some up and down years. And the thing about John Harbaugh also is this. The guy's a great motivator. He gets the most out of his players, and he's shown the ability to lead his football team to wins, playing different styles. 1 minute the Baltimore Ravens are a defensive-minded team that likes to run the football effectively. 1 minute they're winning playoff games with Joe Flacco bombing the ball down the field. And now John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens are embracing the greatness of Lamar Jackson, who's a super unique quarterback, and they're designing an offense where they're going to let Lamar Jackson thrive. So I think John Harbaugh is definitely underappreciated. He's a really good head coach. I'm a believer in John Harbaugh, as you should be. He's underappreciated and underrated, if anything. I don't think he's overrated at all. I'm going to shift to Mike Tomlin. who's another really good head coach. There's a lot of good head coaches in the AFC North. You've got Mike Tomlin. You've got Kevin Stefanski now, the reigning coach of the year for the Cleveland Browns. And, of course, you have John Harbaugh. But I want to zero in on Mike Tomlin. You know, it's funny. I just talked about John Harbaugh, how in 13 years he's had one losing season in his career. Mike Tomlin, through 14 years, has never once had a losing season with the Pittsburgh Steelers with him being the head coach. And 2 years ago, Ben Roethlisberger actually got hurt and missed the entire season after 2 games. And Mike Tomlin was able to go 8-8. He led the Pittsburgh Steelers to being a 500 ball club with Mason Rudolph and Devlin Duck Hodges as his starting quarterback. Devlin Duck Hodges is an undrafted free agent, and he won games with the guy. Bill Belichick couldn't even get to 500 this past year after Tom Brady left. And he had an MVP-level quarterback in Cam Newton. Cam Newton is a former league MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl. And Belichick couldn't even get above 500 with the guy. Okay? And the thing about Mike Tomlin is he's a player's head coach. And listen, Mike Tomlin's actually had to deal with a whole lot of things that I think a lot of coaches haven't realized. 1 minute you had the dysfunction with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, who was kind of a loudmouth, a little bit selfish. You know, he's talented, but he can be a handful in that locker room. Ben Roethlisberger at times, you know, maybe wasn't the greatest leader, a little bit of a drama queen, you know. And Mike Tomlin, he just keeps that train chugging along. And I think Mike Tomlin kind of embraces guys that, you know, maybe have character concerns. He wants to build relationships with those guys. Obviously, he wants guys to have high character and things like that. But it just seems like Mike Tomlin is going to embrace you for who you are as a football player. And I think a guy like Dwayne Haskins, who's now on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, can really relate to a guy like Mike Tomlin. Like Dwayne Haskins, he fell on his face in Washington, former first-round pick out of Ohio State. He's a quarterback. And he was just immature in Washington, really didn't realize what it took to be a franchise quarterback. I think that Mike Tomlin is a guy that's going to get Dwayne Haskins. I think Dwayne Haskins can really benefit from a guy like Mike Tomlin, but we'll see. Dwayne has a lot to prove. We'll talk about him as the show goes on once again. But see, the thing is, Mike Tomlin knows what he is. You know, he's not this defensive guru. He's not this offensive genius. Okay, but Mike Tomlin is going to be the best version of himself. And that is, he's Mike Tomlin. He's going to be who he is, you know. I think that's the best thing that a coach can do, is be the best version of himself, okay? Because I've seen so many coaches try to copy the Patriot way or the Bill Belichick way, and sometimes that just doesn't work with every locker room. Not everyone can be Bill Belichick. Not everyone can be Andy Reid. You have to be authentic, and you have to be the best version of yourself. And that's what makes Mike Tomlin great, is he knows who he is, he knows his limitations, and he just rolls with it, you know? And there are going to be some people, obviously, that are going to be out there saying, oh, Mike Tomlin's overrated. The Pittsburgh Steelers haven't won a Super Bowl in over 10 years. And I understand why people are frustrated about that, but here's the thing. Why don't we talk about other coaches like Sean Payton, who hasn't won a Super Bowl in over a decade? And in between that decade, Sean Payton has had multiple losing seasons. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season in Pittsburgh, okay? If the Steelers fired Mike Tomlin today, do you folks out there realize that there would be at least a half dozen general managers bending over backwards immediately and kissing Mike Tomlin's feet and trying to make him the next head coach of their franchise? They'd bend over backwards for the guy. And more than likely, the guy that you would bring in to replace Mike Tomlin is never going to be quite as good as him. Maybe I'm wrong, because there's a lot of good head coaches that have been coming into the NFL recently. But if you were to bet, is this next head coach going to be better or worse than Mike Tomlin? I think history shows you have to take the bet of him being worse, because it's just that Mike Tomlin's been so great that it's hard to match those things, okay? And we have to realize, okay, that winning rings is very, very hard, people. And you look at Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McDermott. I like those guys, but they haven't even won a Super Bowl yet, okay? Aaron Rodgers has won one Super Bowl ring in his career. He's the most talented quarterback of all time. Dan Marino, who some people argue before Aaron Rodgers was the most talented quarterback of all time. He won 0 rings, okay? I know they're quarterbacks. I know we're talking about head coaches here. But the bottom line is, it's hard to win championships, people. Drew Brees couldn't even win a second Super Bowl with a great New Orleans Saints team over the past 3 years, okay? And the fact is, I think that when we look at Bill Belichick, it kind of mesmerizes us a little bit because if you look at Bill Belichick, you say, oh, the standard is being Bill Belichick. And I understand that people want to be the best. And it's great to strive towards being the best. But you also have to be realistic. Bill Belichick, the guy's won 6 Super Bowl championships with the Patriots. He's the greatest head coach of all time. Not everyone is going to be Bill Belichick, okay? So if you eliminate Bill Belichick and you evaluate Mike Tomlin versus everyone else besides Belichick, he passes with flying colors. So I think Steelers fans need to realize that they truly have a great head coach that's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame one day in Mike Tomlin. I don't believe Mike Tomlin is overrated for all the reasons that I mentioned. I think Mike Tomlin's a really good head coach. So when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger is heading into his 18th season as a professional quarterback in the National Football League, and he's currently 39 years old. And a lot of people are speculating that Ben Roethlisberger could potentially retire after the 2021 season. And now Ben Roethlisberger had a pretty solid year in 2020. The Steelers made it to the playoffs. They obviously didn't win a playoff game. Things didn't go their way in the playoffs, but Ben had a solid season. But I don't know if Ben Roethlisberger is the type of quarterback to play for another 4 to 5 seasons. My guess is he's going to, at max, play 2 more years. So that leaves us with the question, who is going to potentially replace Ben Roethlisberger for the future? And I'm here to tell you, it's not Mason Rudolph. It's not Josh Dobbs, who's the next great Pittsburgh Steelers franchise quarterback. My money is on former Ohio State quarterback and former first-round pick of the 2019 NFL Draft, Dwayne Haskins. My money's on Dwayne Haskins being the next great Pittsburgh Steelers franchise quarterback. I'm just going to say it right now. And again, I talked about this in the past. Immediately when the Pittsburgh Steelers signed Dwayne Haskins, I put this opinion out there. I'm going to put it out there once again. Dwayne Haskins will turn his career around with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in fact, I'm here to tell you that Dwayne Haskins is the next great franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'm going to admit, Dwayne Haskins, former first-round pick out of Ohio State, he completely flopped in Washington. But I truly believe that Dwayne Haskins struggling and falling flat on his face was a blessing in disguise for him. Because the reality is, I don't think Washington was a great fit for Dwayne Haskins. Okay? Because the reality is, when Washington drafted him, he was picked by the owner of the football team at the time, and he's still the owner right now, but the owner was Daniel Snyder. And he overruled the coaching staff and said, we're going to draft Dwayne Haskins, when the entire coaching staff and no one in the building wanted to draft Dwayne Haskins. And the problem right there is that, okay, if you're the owner and you're sold on this guy, that's great, but if the coaches don't want to work with him and the coaches are not sold on him being a franchise quarterback, that's a problem. And it's pretty clear early on that Ron Rivera lost faith in Dwayne Haskins. He benched him, early on in the season. He wasn't a big fan of Dwayne Haskins. A lot of fans also kind of lost faith in Dwayne Haskins of Washington. And let's be real, he played poorly. He never really got into a rhythm. He made some bad choices off the field. It just wasn't going to work in Washington. He was not very mature enough. He walked into a very dysfunctional, bad situation with a bad roster. He was a very young, raw quarterback that needed time to sit and develop and really study the NFL game before getting the keys to a franchise. But now Dwayne Haskins gets a fresh start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And sometimes all you need is a fresh start and just get in a different building and interact with different people and work for a different company, okay? People bail on jobs all the time. They go to a new job and they look good as new. And you look at a guy like Brett Favre. People forget, Brett Favre, former Hall of Fame quarterback. Actually, he's still a Hall of Fame quarterback. But you get the point. Brett Favre, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He walked into a very similar situation as Dwayne Haskins when he was drafted. He was drafted by the Falcons. And Jerry Glanville the head coach of the Falcons at the time made it clear he did not want to draft Brett Favre. That was a decision made by ownership. And he at one point said it would take a plane crash for him to put Brett Favre in the game and for him to be the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. And it just wasn't going to work in Atlanta. So Brett Favre gets traded to Green Bay, a much more stable franchise, much more stable organization. He gets an opportunity, and he takes advantage of it. He becomes one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. People forget that Drew Brees, he was drafted by the Chargers, had a very rocky start to his career. But he goes to the New Orleans Saints. He hits the reset button. Drew Brees goes on to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer and a Super Bowl winning quarterback, okay? And the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to put Dwayne Haskins in a great position to succeed. He's going to have stability regarding the coaching staff and the front office. Dwayne Haskins gets an opportunity to learn from Ben Roethlisberger, a former two-time Super Bowl champion, winning quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a great scouting department. They draft well. They're really good at drafting wide receivers, so they're going to put talent around them. Kevin Colbert's arguably the best general manager in all of football. The Steelers are one of the most well-run organizations in all of football. The Steelers currently right now have a championship-level defense. They got star running backs and star wide receivers. The offensive line, I believe, eventually will get fixed. And you watch Dwayne Haskins from this past preseason game with the Steelers. He was making good decisions. He was getting the ball out of his hands very quickly. He wasn't forcing things. You know, he looked like a more refined quarterback. He looked like a different guy. I think eventually Dwayne Haskins is only going to get better and better as the preseason rolls around. And I think that in the Pittsburgh Steelers program and within that organization, he's going to continue to get developed properly, and he'll be ready when his time is called. And Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger are, you know, the head coach of the Steelers and the Hall of Fame quarterback for the Steelers right now. They've said nothing but good things about Dwayne Haskins. You know, Mike Tomlin is raved about him. Several teammates are raved about Dwayne Haskins. You know, Ben Roethlisberger said that if Dwayne Haskins were to throw a football into a car wash, it wouldn't get wet. He really loves his throwing mechanics. And people forget, Dwayne Haskins was pretty awesome at Ohio State. He only had 1 year of production at Ohio State, but it was an all-time great season, a season in which he threw 50 touchdown passes to only 8 interceptions. He completed about 70% of his throws. I mean, he was awesome. And you saw the great arm strength. He made great decisions with the football. He won big games. And there seemed to be an it factor with Dwayne Haskins where this guy has the swagger, the arm talent, and the mental makeup to become a really, really good franchise quarterback. Okay? Go back and watch Northwestern versus Ohio State in 2019. Now, I believe that was Dwayne Haskins' best game, where he threw for nearly 500 yards. He was throwing the football down the field, throwing on the run, making these incredible throws. And he was a man amongst boys versus a really good Northwestern team that had a really good defense, okay? So, look, I think Dwayne Haskins definitely can turn his career around in Pittsburgh. I believe he will, for all the reasons that I mentioned. It's a fresh start for him. It's a new opportunity. And I believe Dwayne Haskins will not let this opportunity squander. I believe he's up for the challenge. And I believe Dwayne Haskins is the next great franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers after Ben Roethlisberger retires. So, here's the thing. Let me get straight to the point right here regarding Dwayne Haskins once again. Dwayne Haskins deserves the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I understand there are some people out there that think I am absolutely crazy for believing that Dwayne Haskins can make something of himself as a potential franchise quarterback. A lot of people think that he stinks, that he's already a bust, that he's no good. But I'm not going to take that route. I'm sorry, I'm just not. Okay? Here's what we need to do, people, regarding Dwayne Haskins. Let's have an honest conversation, and let's evaluate things. We need to pause and realize that every quarterback develops at their own pace. And people forget, even some Hall of Fame quarterbacks had rocky starts to their career. Peyton Manning had a horrible rookie season. He led the entire NFL in interceptions his rookie year. Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Troy Aikman lost his first 11 career starts. You look at Brett Favre. Brett Favre was not a good quarterback with the Atlanta Falcons. He gets a fresh start. Boom, Brett Favre becomes a Hall of Fame quarterback. Same thing with Drew Brees. Didn't have the greatest start with the Chargers, goes to New Orleans, completely turns his career around. And what we must realize about Dwayne Haskins is when he was coming out of Ohio State, I believed in his talent, but I was one of the few people that said, okay, he's really talented, but maybe he needs to go back to school for an extra year, because there was the concern about Dwayne Haskins only having 1 year of production at Ohio State. And look at guys that have, dominated in the NFL to this point that have been young quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, he played 4 years of college football. Joe Burrow, him coming back to LSU for a second season was huge for his development. And by the way, everyone talks about how good Joe Burrow is. If I recall, Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins were on the same team at Ohio State several years ago. And Dwayne Haskins beat out Joe Burrow. Okay? Dwayne Haskins is really talented. Baker Mayfield had 4 years of production at college. Experience is everything at the quarterback position when you're talking about developing a young quarterback, okay? Because when you have a bunch of college starts, you really get a chance to learn how to dissect defenses, audible at the line of scrimmage, make adjustments, okay? And the speed of the game is always the biggest adjustment, usually for NFL players and especially quarterbacks. And you look at Dwayne Haskins, as a pure pocket passer, he just wasn't ready for the NFL. It seemed like he was always one step behind the 8 ball, It just seemed like the speed of the game really, took him by surprise. And listen, Dwayne Haskins is a pure pocket passer. So if you're a pure pocket passer, I think that sometimes you need a little bit more experience where you can really learn how to dissect defenses and really know the playbook and things like that, because the reality is Dwayne Haskins isn't like Kyler Murray. He's not like Cam Newton, where those guys have that little get-out-of-jail-free card because they're mobile quarterbacks. And it's fine that Dwayne Haskins is a pure pocket passer, because we've seen guys like Tom Brady win multiple Super Bowls just being a pure pocket passer. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, based on how Dwayne Haskins operates as a quarterback, it was key for him to get another extra year of college. And he never, got the extra year. He made a mistake, in my opinion, coming out prematurely. And so when you looked at Dwayne Haskins as a prospect, back when he was at Ohio State and entering the NFL draft, you were drafting him for what he could become, not for what he was. Because, like I said, he had that inexperience at Ohio State. And Washington just flat out was not interested in developing Dwayne Haskins. The ownership was responsible for drafting Dwayne Haskins, not the coaching staff, not the scouting department, the ownership. And he was not developed in Washington. They really put no talent around him, and they expected him to be the guy early on, and he just wasn't mature enough to be that guy. And it seemed like, teams like, the New York Giants did everything to tell you why Daniel Jones was their guy, whereas Washington did everything to tell you why Dwayne Haskins, for whatever reason, wasn't the guy. They pretty much just said, hey, we're going to pick this guy, and if he turns into something great, but we don't really believe in this guy. It was a really shameful situation for Dwayne Haskins to be in. And the thing about Dwayne Haskins is, because he came out prematurely at Ohio State, I think he got the sense that he felt that things were going to be easy for him in the NFL. And honestly, to a certain degree, I kind of understand his thinking, because he said, man, well, that one year I had at Ohio State, it was an all-time great year, Imagine what I can do once I get to the NFL level. This thing is easy. This college exam or these college defenses I'm picking apart, I'm bigger, faster, stronger than all these guys. This is easy. But what Dwayne Haskins failed to realize is it's not all that easy. You can't do the bare minimum in the NFL. And I think Dwayne Haskins realized that once he failed in Washington and got released and didn't even get a second contract in Washington, less than 2 years removed from when Dwayne Haskins was drafted. He got released, okay? But it seems like Dwayne Haskins is a changed man. And I think a lot of people these days fail to give people second chances and second opportunities because, trust these days is hard to come by. I get it. But I think that we need to give Dwayne Haskins the benefit of the doubt, because I truly believe that he's changed his, work ethic habits. The reports are that he's working really hard in Pittsburgh. People have been saying good things about him. And I think we need to give Dwayne Haskins the benefit of the doubt. Every young quarterback develops at their own pace. I think Dwayne Haskins has a great shot to turn his career around in Pittsburgh. He has a lot to prove. I could be totally wrong about him, but I also could see a situation where I'm right about this. So we'll see what happens regarding Dwayne Haskins, but I do think that we all need to give him I do believe we all need to give him the benefit of the doubt and see what he's got, But we'll see what happens with Dwayne Haskins going forward. I want to talk about Ben Roethlisberger in comparison to Dwayne Haskins right now. When Dwayne Haskins was coming out of Ohio State, I usually don't do pro comparisons, but I decided to compare Dwayne Haskins to a guy like Ben Roethlisberger. I felt that Ben Roethlisberger and Dwayne Haskins were very similar players back to their college days. And I've even stated in the past that Dwayne Haskins is sort of a baby Ben Roethlisberger. I said that when he was in Washington, he could be the next Ben Roethlisberger. I was wrong about his time in Washington. He fell flat on his face. But ironically, the guy that I compared Dwayne Haskins to coming out of college now is on the same team with him, okay? And I think Dwayne Haskins has a chance to prove a lot of people wrong, like I said. But right now, I'm going to take the time to tell you why I believe Ben Roethlisberger and Dwayne Haskins are more similar than you realize. Both are big, strong quarterbacks with rocket arms. We all can recognize that, right? At least we can recognize Haskins has arm talent, Both, ironically, fell in the draft. Ben Roethlisberger was the third quarterback taken in his draft class. He fell to the 11th overall pick. Dwayne Haskins fell to the 15th overall pick. Both, ironically, like I said, were the third quarterback taken in their draft, okay? Both, ironically, were passed on by the New York Giants. A lot of people thought Dwayne Haskins was going to be a New York Giant. Same thing with Ben Roethlisberger. The Giants, ironically, passed on both of them. And now both have landed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pretty crazy. And I think Dwayne Haskins can benefit from the Pittsburgh Steelers organization very similar to how Ben Roethlisberger benefited from the Pittsburgh Steelers organization very early on in his career. When you look at Ben Roethlisberger, when he was coming out of college, back in 2004, he went to a small school, which that school was Miami of Ohio, and a lot of people thought he was very talented, no doubt about it. You saw that arm strength, but a lot of people felt that he was raw and that he maybe needed time to develop. Maybe wasn't quite mature enough. Same thing with Dwayne Haskins. Those were some of the concerns about Dwayne Haskins coming out of Ohio State. Urban Meyer, who was his head coach at Ohio State, loves the guy, recruited the guy. But even Urban Meyer said day one, Dwayne Haskins might not be mature enough to take over a franchise because he just needs time. He needs time to develop. Maybe don't give him the keys to the car right away, Let him take the driver's test a couple more times, Let him learn the playbook. Let him nurture and develop. That's what Urban Meyer said during the pre-draft process, okay? And he loved Dwayne Haskins. He recruited the guy. He won games with him. But Urban Meyer was being honest, okay? And here's the thing. Ben Roethlisberger was able to develop at his own pace because he had a great team and a great organization pulling for him and behind him. He had star wide receivers to throw to very, very early in his career. He had a great run game, a really good defense that got him the ball back and took pressure off of him. When you're a young quarterback, if you have star wide receivers, star running backs, a great coaching staff, and a great defense, it takes the pressure off of you, and it makes your job a whole lot easier. And that's what we saw from Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger, the first, 3 to 4 or 5 years of his career, he wasn't on pace to be this Hall of Fame quarterback, but eventually he started to get it. He developed properly, and now Ben Roethlisberger is the first ballot Hall of Famer, multiple-time Super Bowl champion. And I think Dwayne Haskins can develop a similar way where Pittsburgh's going to put great players around him. They're going to make sure he knows the playbook, and they're going to put him in the best possible situation to succeed. And by the way, let me just say this. If Dwayne Haskins cannot make it work with the Pittsburgh Steelers, then he's not a franchise quarterback because you have everything that you need to become the guy. So I'm very interested to see what Dwayne Haskins does with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I believe that he's more similar to Ben Roethlisberger than all of you realize. Dwayne Haskins, a.k.a. Baby Ben Roethlisberger. You know what I'm saying? But that's all I have to say about Dwayne Haskins right there. We'll wrap it up right there. I now want to talk about Najee Harris, the first round pick that the Pittsburgh Steelers selected in the 2021 NFL Draft. Najee Harris is a running back out of the University of Alabama. And I think Najee Harris is a really talented player, no doubt about it. And when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers heading to the 2020 season, look, I've got concerns about Ben Roethlisberger and his age. I think Ben Roethlisberger could potentially decline this season. We'll see. I also have questions about the offensive line. And I do think Pittsburgh has a pretty talented roster, but they're not quite as talented as Baltimore or Cleveland. There's a lot of unknowns with Pittsburgh this year. But there's one thing I'm going to guarantee about the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2021 is this. I believe Najee Harris is going to prove to be a great running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now, I'm just going to say it right now. I believe Najee Harris is going to win the 2021 NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year award. He's my pick to win Rookie of the Year. And here's why. First of all, the Pittsburgh Steelers used a first-round pick on Najee Harris. They're gonna get him involved in that offense very, very quickly and very, very often. And you have an old aging quarterback on the roster in Ben Roethlisberger. What does that mean? That means that the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're gonna use Najee Harris to take the pressure off of Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, that's why they drafted him. Because Ben Roethlisberger's old, he's past his prime, and you don't want that guy throwing the ball 30, 40, or 50 times a game. You want to be a balanced football team. That's what the Green Bay Packers, decided a couple of years ago. They said Aaron Rodgers is getting up there in age. We're going to run the football with Aaron Jones. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They said we're going to run the football with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. We're going to take the pressure off of Tom Brady because he is an older quarterback. That's what you do when you have an old aging quarterback. You get him a run game. And I think Najee Harris is the spark plug the Pittsburgh Steelers offense has really been looking for over the past couple of years. And they're not just going to run the football with Najee Harris. They're going to get him involved in the passing game as well because he's a very versatile running back. Okay? And the Steelers also are a well-coached football team, so there's not going to be a whole lot of blowouts and things like that. And why is that relevant? That's relevant because, if you're getting blown out, it's hard to run the football. When you're down 13, 14, or 20 points, you got to throw the football. You can't establish a run game then because you have to get down the field in a hurry. I think the Steelers will be in a lot of close games this year, and as a result, that'll allow Najee Harris to get a lot of carries. And also, you bring in Matt Canada, a new offensive coordinator that's going to really shake things up this year. I think that Najee Harris is a perfect fit for Matt Canada's offense. Now, when you look at some other candidates for Rookie of the Year in 2021, obviously you have to look at Justin Fields and Trey Lance, but I don't know if those guys are going to start right out the gate. San Francisco and Chicago has made it known they're not in a rush to put Justin Fields or Trey Lance out there. So it's a matter of how many games are these guys going to play? We'll see. They may be good redshirt this year for all I know. Look at Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson has some talent, even though I do have my doubts about him. But I don't think Zach Wilson's going to win enough games. I think there's going to be some choppy performances from Zach Wilson this year. Look at Trevor Lawrence. Maybe he could win the award, but I don't know. I just get this weird feeling that Najee Harris is going to win the award. And people are going to say, it's a quarterback-driven league. A quarterback's going to win the award. Are we sure about that? Because as far as I'm concerned, the last 8 Rookie of the Year award winners, 5 of those 8 players have not been quarterbacks. Offensive Rookie of the Year. You look at the last 8 winners. Eddie Lacy, running back. Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver. Todd Gurley, running back. Dak Prescott, he was a quarterback. Although I'd argue Ezekiel Elliott should have won that year. But that's not the point. Let's continue. Alvin Kamara, running back. Saquon Barkley, running back. Kyler Murray, quarterback. Justin Herbert, quarterback. 5 of these 8 guys that have won Offensive Rookie of the Year over the past 8 years have not been quarterbacks. So I think Najee Harris is very talented. You see incredible runs when you turn on his film. He has great vision, very powerful runner, has great balance. He's very, very quick and subtle with his movements. He's very hard to bring down, hard to tackle. He'll break tackles in the open field. I think he has underrated speed as well. And for my money this year, Najee Harris is my pick to win Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2021. Okay, everyone, I'm going to take a short break. When I return, I'm going to tell you why the Pittsburgh Steelers are McDonald's, why they have become the McDonald's of the NFL. Yes, it's a very crazy analogy. I'll get right into it once I come back. Don't go anywhere. People, this is Jemiah McKinney, and you were tuned into the Juice Alert. Okay, everyone, I'm officially back right now. Let's dive into the Pittsburgh Steelers once again. You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a very interesting team. But the question is, where are we today with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2021? Where are we at? Okay, here's where we're at. What have the Pittsburgh Steelers become? Right now today, the Pittsburgh Steelers are McDonald's. Okay? And you can take that as a good statement or a bad statement, depending on how you view McDonald's. Personally, I don't think that that's a negative statement on my part. I love McDonald's. I love their cheeseburgers, their chicken McNuggets, the Big Mac, the strawberry pies, the cherry pies, apple pies, the ice cream's pretty good, all that stuff. I am a huge fan of McDonald's, ironically, okay? But here's the thing. I think we all can agree that being a huge fan of McDonald's these days is no longer the cool thing on the block. Several years ago, loving McDonald's was cool, because you had the Happy Meal, you had the little playground in certain areas. If you go into McDonald's, when I was little, I used to go to the little playground area at McDonald's and play around, have a good time with friends. You had the French fries, the strawberry sundaes, and you still have a lot of those things on the menu, but here's the thing. McDonald's was one of the first restaurants to really break through and be a trailblazer in the fast food industry. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. That organization used to be the trailblazer, the eye-opening franchise that everyone talked about. And several years ago even, people were saying, man, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they might be the next dynasty. Heading into the Super Bowl versus Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, that was on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a chance to win 3 Super Bowls within a 10-year period, but they obviously fell short. And now, today, 10, 11 years later, it's more cool to be a fan of the Packers or the Rams or the Chiefs. That's just the reality. That's my opinion. I think that right now, today, there's more of a cool factor to the Chiefs and the Rams and even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady. And you can say what you want about the Packers, but the Packers are talked about a lot. The Aaron Rodgers news, they've won a lot of games. They've been to back-to-back NFC Championship games. Is anyone going to be surprised if Green Bay wins a Super Bowl this year? I personally won't be. However, I will be surprised if Pittsburgh wins the Super Bowl this year because I think Pittsburgh's Super Bowl window has kind of closed, And here's the thing. I talked about how it's no longer cool to love McDonald's. I'm going to kind of make a little analogy right here. If you are a guy and you know this girl from school or maybe from work and you have a thing for her and you potentially are asking her out for the first time, or maybe if you're a girl and the guy asks you, where do you want to go on a date? Or like I said, if you're a guy and you ask a girl out on a date and he or she says, I want to go to McDonald's. And that's your first time asking the person out. Let's pretend it's the first time you're asking them out. Or they say that they want to go out somewhere and they say, I want to go to McDonald's. Aren't you going to kind of look at them funny? Wouldn't they much rather go to Chick-fil A? There seems to be more flair to Chick-fil A. If you're asking someone out for the first date to McDonald's, I don't know if it's the cool thing to do anymore. I think there's a little bit more flair to the Chick-fil-A's of the world. And by the way, I rather prefer a more fancy restaurant or maybe going to the park, maybe to get ice cream or something like that. Or maybe you go to a movie. I don't know. But there seems to be more flair to Chick-fil-A or even Popeyes or Raising Cane's, chicken places that I really like. The popularity of McDonald's has kind of died down. McDonald's used to be the standard of fast food. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers, same thing with them. They used to be the standard of the NFL, along with the Patriots. But now, the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Ravens, and the 49ers. Those teams are the standard today. Pittsburgh is still near the top, but they're not the top dog like they used to be. And there are more teams that people are talking about and more teams that people are interested in. Listen, if you go somewhere, if you go anywhere in the world, you can find Pittsburgh Steelers gear. Just like if you go anywhere in the world, you'll find a McDonald's spot probably. Okay, but is it the most popular spot on the block anymore? I think not. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the standard of football anymore, just like I don't think McDonald's is the standard of fast food anymore. It's still a popular brand, but not quite as popular as it used to be. So that's where I'm at with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're McDonald's. They're the McDonald's of football, and you can take that as a good thing or with a grain of salt. It's all dependent on how you feel. Okay, I'm going to cut straight to the point regarding Ben Roethlisberger and this segment right here. I believe you can still win a Super Bowl with Ben Roethlisberger as your quarterback. I understand that sudden regression could be coming towards Ben Roethlisberger as he enters his age 39 season, his 18th season in the NFL. So listen, there's a possibility that Ben Roethlisberger's body could regress to a point where he just isn't capable of playing at a high level anymore. If that happens, you've got me. It's a possibility. I'm going to say that right now. Ben Roethlisberger is now on that clock where, he could hit his expiration point at any time. It could happen at any sudden moment. All of a sudden out of nowhere, Peyton Manning just kind of sucked. Same thing with Brett Favre. We didn't see it coming. Okay? So, if that happens, you got me. But based on last year and the totality of the year that Ben Roethlisberger had, I think you have to believe that Ben Roethlisberger still has a little something left in the tank. I believe Ben Roethlisberger had a very good season last year. Last year, Ben Roethlisberger completed 65.6% of his passes, threw 33 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, and had a pass rating of 94, which is on pace for what his career pass rating is, which is 94. He's a 94 career passer rating. That's what he had last year. He also threw for 3,803 yards, and he went 12-3 as a starter. And it's pretty easy to think that he'd go for over 4,000 yards if he would have played in Week 17. They rested him in Week 17 for obvious reasons. They had playoff seeding locked up and things like that. But the bottom line is, Ben Roethlisberger had a very good year last year. And keep in mind, the Pittsburgh Steelers last year had no run game, a shaky offensive line, and a young wide receiver core that, while it was very talented and it's still very talented today, that young wide receiver core made a lot of mistakes. In fact, they led the entire NFL in drop passes. And I find it hard to believe that anyone will be saying that Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady no longer have nothing left in the tank if they were put in the same situation Ben Roethlisberger was put in. Let's say Aaron Rodgers had a very similar year to Ben Roethlisberger this past year. Let's just pretend that Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger swapped uniforms, and Aaron Rodgers had the year that Ben Roethlisberger had, where Aaron Rodgers completed 65% of his passes, threw over 30 touchdowns, only 10 interceptions, and had a 94 pass rating. Pretty good year. When you take into account that he had no run game, a shaky offensive line, and a wide receiver core that led the NFL in drops, I'm pretty sure the media would be blaming the supporting cast around Aaron Rodgers and saying, man, these wide receivers need to catch passes better. The offensive line needs to block better. Aaron Rodgers needs a run game. This isn't on Aaron Rodgers. The media will be doing the same thing for Tom Brady. They say, oh, Tom Brady, woe is me. Oh, Tom Brady, I feel so bad. He has no run game. His offensive line is shaky. His wide receivers are dropping passes. Boo-hoo-hoo. Meanwhile, when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, because he's not always liked by the media and people, don't cater towards him like they do to Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, for some reason, I think he's getting unwarranted and unnecessary criticism thrown his way. People have said Ben Roethlisberger's washed, he's old, The Steelers need to move on from him. Listen, Ben Roethlisberger is the best option for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win games this year. Dwayne Haskins, I think he's talented, but I don't think he's quite ready to take over the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise quite yet. I'm not all that confident in Mason Rudolph, and Josh Dobbs, don't even get me started. He's an afterthought. Same with Mason Rudolph to a certain degree as well, as most Pittsburgh Steelers fans want that guy gone. I think a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans are over Mason Rudolph. The reality is last year, Ben Roethlisberger won 12 games despite having no run game, a shake offensive line, and a wide receiver core that dropped a ton of passes. Okay? And when you have an old aging quarterback, you want to be able to run the football effectively, to take pressure off that guy. The Pittsburgh Steelers were not able to do that. I think that's a big reason why Ben Roethlisberger, his wheels kind of fell off at the end of the year, because the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't able to establish a run game late in the season, and as the season went on, Ben got a little fatigued and just couldn't spark the magic that he had and the juice that he had at the beginning of the season. And also, people, we've seen Nick Foles win a Super Bowl in recent history. A couple of years ago, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. A couple of years ago, a washed-up, no-good Peyton Manning that threw more interceptions than touchdown passes, he won a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback. Tom Brady this past year, at 43 years old, won the Super Bowl. We've seen Jimmy Garoppolo and Jared Goff play in Super Bowls in recent years. You mean to tell me this version of Ben Roethlisberger isn't just as good, if not better, than that version of those quarterbacks? The arm strength is still there. The decision making is still pretty good, even though Ben Roethlisberger, he's going to throw 1 to 2, passes every single game. That's just what he does. But he's been doing that his entire career. Okay? But Ben Roethlisberger has experience. He's won multiple championships. Okay? And he does the little things right. Changing plays at the line of scrimmage. Audibly in and out of the right plays. His leadership is there, okay, because he has all the experience in the world. He may have been a shaky leader in the past, but I think Ben Roethlisberger has improved as a leader over the past couple of years. The bottom line is, I don't really understand the Ben Roethlisberger criticisms. I think that he's still a pretty good quarterback, and right now, today, heading into the 2021 season, you can still win a Super Bowl with Ben Roethlisberger as your starting quarterback. So the question I now want to answer is Ben Roethlisberger, a.k.a. Big Ben, an all-time great quarterback? When we look at Ben Roethlisberger and his career, he's heading into his 18th season this year. He's thrown over 6,000 passing yards, nearly 400 touchdown passes. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl champion. He's been to 3 Super Bowls. Like I said, won 2 of them. He had one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time for a quarterback. He won a lot of games that year. He's had a great career. First ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. But the question is Ben Roethlisberger an all-time great quarterback? No. I'm going to say the answer is no to that question. Now, I will say if Ben Roethlisberger were to somehow win another Super Bowl to finish his career off, I will put him in the all-time great category, because at some point, if you've won 2 Super Bowls, you're in the conversation for being an all-time great quarterback, even though I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is quite on that level. But once you get to 3, 4 or 5 Super Bowls, at some point you have to give it up, especially if you put up great numbers. And Ben Roethlisberger's numbers are pretty good. So if he wins another Super Bowl, I'll eat my words. But right now, today, I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is an all-time great quarterback. And what do I mean by an all-time great quarterback? What I mean by that is that quarterback deserves to be in the group and in the inner sanctum of quarterbacks that dominated their era, or were at least at some point consistently in the conversation for best quarterback in the world. At some point consistently, okay? There's kind of a Chris Paul factor to Ben Roethlisberger, where Ben Roethlisberger's had a great career, okay, but compared to a guy like, Chris Paul, I'm using a basketball analogy here. Chris Paul's had a great career, but Chris Paul was never a guy that was consistently in the MVP conversation, never was consistently considered the best basketball player in the world, at least wasn't consistently in that conversation for a consistent period of time. That's why I don't believe Chris Paul is a top 5 point guard of all time, because he didn't dominate his era enough for me. And that's where I'm at with Ben Roethlisberger. Now, you can look at the numbers and say, oh, look at the numbers. Ben Roethlisberger's numbers are great. First of all, Ben Roethlisberger, right now today, he's not top 5 all-time in passing yards, not top 5 all-time in touchdown passes, not top 5 all-time in pass rating. In fact, his touchdown to interception ratio for his career, so what I'm talking about here is how many touchdowns per interception do you throw, okay? He currently ranks 20th all-time. Donovan McNabb, Ryan Tannehill, and Carson Wentz have a higher all-time touchdown to interception ratio than Ben Roethlisberger. So, are his numbers really all-time great? I'm not sure. And by the way, a lot of quarterbacks are putting up all-time great numbers nowadays, because it's a different era than it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott are top 10 in career passer rating right now. So the numbers kind of at times lie to us, So I don't just go based off the numbers. Here's the thing. Ben Roethlisberger is not one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. So that automatically sort of kind of puts him in a spot where he's battling with a lot of other quarterbacks. And once you get to 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 15 quarterbacks, as far as, Hall of Famers and all-time great quarterbacks, yet you at some point need to draw a line, okay? The 10 to 15 range, that's about where you need to draw the line. And here's the thing. In Ben Roethlisberger's era, the era in which he played in, he was never in the conversation for best quarterback in football. He never was that guy. At no point did any NFL fans look at Ben Roethlisberger and say, yeah, that guy's the best quarterback in all football. And I have to admit, Ben Roethlisberger has probably played in the greatest era of quarterbacks, because I truly believe the last, 10 to 15 years, and really in today's NFL right now, we're living in a world where the quarterback position is better than ever, okay? But when you look at Ben Roethlisberger's era, Tom Brady was clearly better. Peyton Manning was clearly better. Aaron Rodgers was clearly better. And I think Drew Brees was better. I think that Drew Brees, put up better numbers, actually carried the Saints to heights that they probably should have never been to in the first place. Drew Brees' numbers are all-time great. He's first, second, or third in mostly every single category. He's never quite had the wide receivers that Ben Roethlisberger's had. Ben Roethlisberger's had star wide receivers throughout his career. And while Drew Brees has had a Michael Thomas and a Jimmy Graham, hasn't quite had the weaponry that Ben Roethlisberger's had, yet his numbers are better, okay? And you even look at a guy like Russell Wilson. I think you can make the argument that Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, maybe he doesn't quite have the numbers that Ben has or the longevity, but Russell Wilson's played in multiple Super Bowls. He's a Super Bowl champion, and he's never had a losing season in his career. He's more durable than Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's a better leader than Ben Roethlisberger. The talent is about the same. In fact, I think that because of Russell Wilson's ability to run around and make plays, I think that he's a more talented quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger. That's not to take away anything from Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger is really talented, but Russell Wilson, that guy's on a different level. And you look at Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has already won a league MVP and a Super Bowl MVP. Ben Roethlisberger has done neither of those things. He doesn't have a Super Bowl MVP. He's won 2 Super Bowls, but doesn't have a Super Bowl MVP, and he hasn't won a league MVP, okay? So anytime you are a guy that hasn't won a league MVP or has never quite been in the conversation for best quarterback in your era, if you're like the 5th, 6th, or 7th best quarterback of your era, I don't think you're an all-time great quarterback, okay? You can say Ben Roethlisberger's never won a league MVP. Same thing with Drew Brees. Okay, Drew Brees' numbers are way better than Ben Roethlisberger, like I said. In fact, statistically, Philip Rivers is a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger. Now, does that mean that that's the nail in the coffin? Meaning, is Philip Rivers actually better than Ben Roethlisberger? Of course not. I think that I would definitely much rather have Ben Roethlisberger over Philip Rivers. But I beg the question, who consistently has had the better coaching staff? the better organization supporting them, the better wide receiver core consistently. Who's had the better teams? I'd say the better Roethlisberger and the teams that he has been given and the stability he's been given. It's not even close compared to some of the dysfunction Phillip Rivers has had to go through with the Chargers consistently throughout his career. And yet, we're at a point where Phillip Rivers, for his career, has a better completion percentage than Ben Roethlisberger, along with a better career pass rating. He's thrown for more career yards, more career touchdowns, and he's been the much more durable player. Ben Roethlisberger has only played 16 games 4 times during his 17-year career. So only 4 seasons out of 17 seasons has Ben Roethlisberger played all 16 games. Phillip Rivers was an Iron Man, has one of the longest streaks for games played of all time. Meanwhile, Ben Roethlisberger, 13 of his 17 years as a starting quarterback, he's missed at least 1 game for whatever reason due to injury or something like that. It's pretty crazy to think about. So, look, we all know that Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, John Elway, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, those quarterbacks are far and away better than Ben Roethlisberger as far as being an all-time great quarterback. You look at Dan Marino, even though Dan Marino did not win a Super Bowl, Dan Marino won a league MVP. If you ask someone off the street that knows football, who's the better quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger or Dan Marino? They'll tell you Dan Marino, and they probably won't think twice about it. You look at Drew Brees. Like I said earlier, I'll take Drew Brees over Ben Roethlisberger. Even a guy like Johnny Unitas. Johnny Unitas has 3 league MVPs to his name. He's won 3 MVPs. He's a 10-time Pro Bowler, more Pro Bowl appearances than Ben Roethlisberger, and he's a 5-time first-team All-Pro. I think Johnny Unitas is a better all-time quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger. I think Otto Graham is a better all-time quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger because he's got a similar resume to Johnny Unitas. And we didn't even get to Troy Aikman, Terry Bradshaw, guys that maybe didn't put up incredible numbers, but those guys won multiple Super Bowls just like Ben Roethlisberger. In fact, Terry Bradshaw's won 4 Super Bowls, has a league MVP, more Super Bowl championships than Ben Roethlisberger, and a league MVP. You can make the argument Terry Bradshaw's better than Ben Roethlisberger. What about Steve Young? Steve Young's a 2-time league MVP. He's won a Super Bowl before. I think he's a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger flat out. You look at Roger Staubach. Roger Staubach versus Ben Roethlisberger. That's an interesting debate. The point is, it's not clear-cut that Ben Roethlisberger deserves to be in the inner sanctum of guys that have changed the game of football, guys that were the top dogs of their era. In Ben Roethlisberger's era, he was roughly the 5th, 6th, or 7th best quarterback of his own era. And that doesn't even take into account guys like Terry Bradshaw, Dan Marino, Johnny Unitas, Steve Young, other all-time great quarterbacks. He's never won a league MVP. He's never consistently been the best at his position. So, look, while his numbers are great, he's had a great, phenomenal career. He's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. I think Ben Roethlisberger still has some work to do to become an all-time great quarterback. And when it's all said and done, I don't think he'll be in that class, and that's how I feel about Ben Roethlisberger's career. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. He's super talented, but he's not quite an all-time great quarterback, and that's fine because even Eli Manning, to me, isn't an all-time great quarterback. And I think Ben Roethlisberger is better than him. The thing about Eli Manning is he just was too inconsistent. You know, there were some years where Eli Manning was just not very good. He won 2 Super Bowls, but Eli Manning, just like Ben Roethlisberger, was never consistently in the MVP conversation. He was never consistently among the best of the best. And that's how I feel about Roethlisberger. Solid career, no doubt about it. Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion. We'll never be able to take that away from him. But Ben Roethlisberger is not an all-time great quarterback for all the reasons that I mentioned. So recently I compared the Pittsburgh Steelers to McDonald's. Because from a popularity standpoint, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers and McDonald's, both as franchises, are kind of similar. You know, there was a little bit of a cool factor that used to be there with McDonald's, and same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it was cool to be a fan of the Steelers, you know, but nowadays, you know, it's more cooler to be a fan of the Chiefs, the Ravens, you know, the Browns are on the uprise and things like that. And you got restaurants like Fil A on the rise. Meanwhile, McDonald's has kind of stayed about the same, things like that. And like I said, the Steelers used to be far and away the standard and the best organization in all football, along with the Patriots. And maybe they're still amongst the best, but the gap between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the rest of the NFL regarding organizations, the gap isn't as wide as it used to be. And here's the reality of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl window has closed. Heading into 2021, I don't consider the Pittsburgh Steelers to be a Super Bowl contender. In fact, I won't be surprised if they miss the playoffs. Now, last year the Pittsburgh Steelers, at one point, they looked like an elite team. They looked like a team that could potentially challenge Kansas City or Tampa Bay. But at the end of the year, they just kind of ran out of gas, and there just didn't seem to be enough juice within the franchise, And maybe you can make the argument this team has kind of peaked under Mike Tomlin. Like, I get it. It's hard to fire a guy like Mike Tomlin, but they haven't won a Super Bowl in over a decade with Mike Tomlin as the head coach, and they've had some talented teams. Let's not act like the Pittsburgh Steelers organization hasn't put good players in Mike Tomlin's lap. He's had talent. Ben Roethlisberger's been there throughout that whole time. Hall of Fame quarterback. Okay? And the reality is the division has even caught up to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The AFC North is as good as it's ever been from top to bottom. The Cincinnati Bengals aren't going to make the playoffs right now, this year in 2021, but they're a real competitive football team with a real quarterback in Joe Burrow. They got some real weapons. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. Those guys can play. Cincinnati is no longer a pushover, okay? Look at Baltimore. Baltimore has an MVP-level quarterback and Lamar Jackson, a great coaching staff. They've even invested in the wide receiver core. Baltimore is a real threat to win the Super Bowl potentially this year. And you look at Cleveland, I don't think there's a single weakness on their roster. And years ago, Cleveland was awful. But now they're better, in my opinion, right now today than the Steelers. They're more talented. That's the harsh reality. At the end of the year, last year in the playoffs, we saw Cleveland and Pittsburgh face off. Cleveland was the better team at the end of the year. Okay? Now, are the Pittsburgh Steelers in a rebuilding stage? I don't think so, because organizations like the Steelers, they don't rebuild. They're too well-run of an organization to a point where they're not going to be a team that rebuilds once things go south. They're a team that's going to retool. So I think right now we're at a point where the Steelers are kind of retooling things. Like, they're trying to get the offensive line fixed. We're trying to figure out who's the successor to Ben Roethlisberger. Is it Dwayne Haskins? I think it is, but I could be totally wrong. Maybe they draft a quarterback. Maybe they sign a quarterback. Hey, maybe Aaron Rodgers is available for the Steelers going forward. But right now, today, as far as quarterback and head coach combination, I think the Baltimore Ravens have a better head coach and quarterback combination right now today. Same thing with Cleveland. I think Kevin Stefanski is a real head coach. I don't think he's a fluke. I think Baker Mayfield is ascending, whereas Ben Roethlisberger is descending. At the end of the year, it seems like Baker Mayfield was the better quarterback compared to Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, and in a couple of years, I could see Cincinnati, if they fix their defensive issues and their offensive line, they could be a real team. So I think the Steelers had a great run the last 10 to 11 or 12 years where they got to a few Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl, but the reality is I think Pittsburgh, they just don't have enough juice today right now. I don't think they're a top 10 team. I think they're in a retooling stage, and that's where I'm at with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their Super Bowl window is closed. We shall see when it opens. Once again, I will keep you guys updated, as always, but that's how I feel right now about the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Okay, people, when I return, I'm going to not be talking about the Steelers. I'm going to circle back to the Baltimore Ravens. Then I'll close the show out by talking about, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. But before I get to them, I'll talk about Rashod Bateman and why he could be the piece that changes the puzzle, potentially, for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens and their Super Bowl chances going forward. Don't go anywhere, people. I will be right back. This is Jamon McKinnon. You were tuned into the Juice Alert. Okay, everyone, I am officially back. And for good on the show right here. No more breaks. We're going to chug right through this show and get out of here. So, let me talk about the Baltimore Ravens once again. The Baltimore Ravens drafted Rashod Bateman, wide receiver out of Minnesota, with the 27th overall pick in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. And I believe this was a great addition for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. And I actually felt that if he was I felt that if Rashod Bateman was on the board for the Baltimore Ravens, they were going to take him. I actually had him mocked to the Philadelphia Eagles when I did my mock draft, but I felt that if Rashod Bateman was there, the Baltimore Ravens were going to take him because I felt that he was a perfect fit for their offense. And the Ravens needed to upgrade their wide receiver core. If you watch the Baltimore Ravens at any point over the past couple of years, you would have known one of their biggest weaknesses is the wide receiver position, okay? And right now, the Baltimore Ravens, they're in a stage where they are in the Super Bowl conversation. But I don't think they're quite amongst the favorites, with Kansas City, with Tampa Bay, with Cleveland, who's in their own division, They're not quite in that class. You got Lamar Jackson, an MVP level quarterback who is excellent. You have a great run game. You have a pretty good defense. And you have a head coach in John Harbaugh who's won a Super Bowl in the past. I think that John Harbaugh still is a pretty good head coach right now today. Definitely. But if you've watched the Baltimore Ravens over the past couple of years, like I said, you know that they struggle to come from behind, and they just have needed to be more dynamic on offense in regards to when they've been in the playoffs. They haven't been as dynamic as Kansas City or Buffalo or Tampa Bay. That's been their downfall. But the Baltimore Ravens this offseason, they went big on wide receiver. They signed Sammy Watkins. They drafted Taylor Wallace later on in the draft, who I think is going to be really good as well. But we're going to stick to Rashod Bateman because I think Rashod Bateman is a guy to pay attention to. And I believe Rashod Bateman and Lamar Jackson could eventually build a special connection. They could become a great quarterback and wide receiver duo. And Rashod Bateman could be the number one wide receiver that puts Lamar Jackson over the top. Remember, Kyler Murray, before he got DeAndre Hopkins, he was good, but he wasn't as good as he is right now. Josh Allen, before he got Stephon Diggs, we didn't see these flashes from Josh Allen every single week. We saw it every now and then. But Josh Allen's a totally different quarterback from the time in which he didn't have Stephon Diggs to where he has Stephon Diggs right now. A whole different quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, he's really, really good. Won the league MVP this past year. But a big reason is because Devontae Adams is a beast. You look at Patrick Mahomes. He has Tyreek Hill, arguably the most lethal weapon in all football, at least the fastest wide receiver and fastest weapon in all football. The point is, the Ravens owed it to Lamar Jackson to find him a legitimate number one wide receiver. Now, when you look at Rashod Bateman, he's about 6 foot tall, 6'1", but his kind of lack of height doesn't really worry me because Antonio Brown is 5'10". He's one of the greatest wide receivers of our generation. Going to be potentially a Hall of Famer one day, depending on who you ask. You look at Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin and Rashod Bateman are about the same size, and Terry McLaurin, he's excellent. Tyreek Hill, he's a smaller guy, but he gets the job done because he's a special player. And I think Rashod Bateman plays a lot bigger than his size. This guy is able to win 50-50 balls. He's violent in the open field as far as breaking tackles, making things happen with the ball in his hands. And also, Rashod Bateman comes across as a guy that's a team player because the Baltimore Ravens, they run the football, so they ask their wide receivers to block a lot. I think he's going to be a willing blocker. I think the Baltimore Ravens hit it out the park by drafting him. I think Rashod Bateman's a guy to keep your eye on. Could he be the weapon that puts Lamar Jackson and the Ravens over the top? We shall see. I believe it's possible. Let me now shift to the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to talk about Joe Burrow because let's be real. The Cincinnati Bengals are really only an interesting team because of Joe Burrow. You're not talking about the Cincinnati Bengals because of Sam Hubbard. I think he's a good player, but Joe Burrow's what moves the needle for me. If Joe Burrow's not playing for the Bengals, I'm not interested in them. I'm sorry, people. Of course, I'm going to do my due diligence and cover all 32 NFL teams, just like I cover all the NBA teams. But Joe Burrow makes things more interesting for Cincinnati, no doubt about it. He's made that franchise relevant once again. And I believe Joe Burrow is a special quarterback, not just an average quarterback, not just a guy that's pretty good. I think Joe Burrow is different. He's special. And I advocated for the Cincinnati Bengals to draft him heading into that 2020 draft. You know, when he was at LSU, he had an all-time great season. Maybe arguably the greatest college football season of all time. Now, Joe Burrow did suffer a setback this past year in Cincinnati as he tore his ACL midway through the season versus Washington. It was a brutal injury, but I do trust that Joe Burrow will be back and close to 100% and will forget this ever happened. But I could see a scenario where Joe Burrow potentially, if my prediction were to end up being wrong, it could end up being because Joe Burrow, for whatever reason, isn't quite the same post-ACL injury. So that is something to keep your eye on. But I believe in Joe Burrow. Okay, Joe Burrow had an excellent rookie season before he got hurt. In 10 games, had 13 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions, had a 90 passer rating. And I think Joe Burrow really is only scratching the surface. Joe Burrow showcased veteran habits as a rookie, meaning he was making great decisions with the football. He was taking care of the football, not turning it over. And his ability to process defenses, I'm not going to say it's elite right now because there's only a few guys that are elite at processing defenses, but it's really, really good, especially for a rookie, man. He's making great decisions as a rookie, okay? And Joe Burrow is a hard worker. You hear about his work ethic, you know, from him being a guy that was sort of casted off at Ohio State in favor of Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins beats him out. Joe Burrow has a transfer to LSU, has a decent year the first year at LSU, but then that leap that he made his second year at LSU, it was a phenomenal leap, and that's a testament to his work ethic, okay? And Joe Burrow, like I said, he's a guy that's the first guy in, last guy out. He's very competitive. There's reports that this guy just hates losing. He's a guy that you do not want to be around in that locker room if he loses. And Joe Burrow comes across as a very confident quarterback. He has that swagger, but he also kind of knows when to tone it down and be serious, okay? And his ball placement down the field and accuracy down the field is pretty special stuff, man. And last year, TJ Houshmandzadeh was raving about this guy. TJ Houshmandzadeh, if you don't know, he's a former Cincinnati Bengal player. He trains with players in the offseason. He was working out with Joe Burrow, and he said even quarterbacks like Josh Allen, who plays for the Buffalo Bills, who had a great season last year, you know, that was working with Joe Burrow. He said even Josh Allen was raving about Joe Burrow's accuracy, and he hadn't even played an NFL game yet. That's how special Joe Burrow is, really. His ability to process information quickly, the way he handles blitzes is very impressive. There just really seems to be no panic with Joe Burrow. You know, there's a little bit of a Tom Brady, you know, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers quality where if you bring pressure in their face, those guys, for whatever reason, they just don't panic. You know, they're calm, cool, and collected, and they make great decisions even with guys in their face, you know. And look, there is some things Joe Burrow will need to work on. His deep ball accuracy wasn't all that great this past year. I do attribute that to him playing behind a piss poor, very bad offensive line. And you could maybe point to his lack of arm strength being a concern. But I think Joe Burrow is going to work on his deep ball accuracy because at LSU, he showcased the ability to throw the deep ball very, very well. So I think that's just a rookie growing pain he'll have to go through. I will say Joe Burrow also, his mobility and athleticism is very underrated. He's able to evade pressure when guys come running free towards him. He's not as fast as a Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, or Lamar Jackson, but he's a very good athlete. I think that he's actually a more mobile and bigger version of Drew Brees. I believe that's what he could become. Like, best case scenario for Joe Burrow, in my opinion, is he's a bigger, stronger, faster version of Drew Brees. And Drew Brees is one of the most accurate and precise passers the NFL has ever seen, a former Super Bowl champion. And once the Saints put a good team around Drew Brees, he won a Super Bowl. And I think if the Bengals put talent around Joe Burrow and they put the right coaching staff in place, he's going to win big games. I think Joe Burrow has ice in his veins. He won a Heisman and a national championship in college. There's no reason why this guy can't win a Super Bowl if he stays healthy. So I hope the Bengals build around Joe Burrow. I'm very interested to see how things play out in Cincinnati over the next, I should say, 5 to 10 years. I think Joe Burrow is the guy for the future. I was actually recently at the Cincinnati Bengals training camp practice in Cincinnati, and Joe Burrow, he looked pretty good. He was throwing the ball effectively, and I think Cincinnati has some good young talent, but they still have a lot of ways to go before they're better than Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland. They've got a long ways to go. But Joe Burrow, to me, will be there every step of the way. He's going to provide them with great quarterback play. And it's kind of funny. The Bengals had a great team when Andy Dalton was there, but Andy Dalton was the problem. Now, they finally have a great quarterback, and it seems like the supporting cast around Joe Burrow is the problem. If they could just blend in Joe Burrow and put some talent with him, there's going to be some good things in Cincinnati, no doubt about it. So that's how I feel about Joe Burrow. I believe he is a special quarterback, like I said. So when it comes to Joe Burrow, like I said, special quarterback, very talented, but a quarterback's success is always dependent upon the organization and the team that is put around him. So we have to talk about Zach Taylor. The question is Zach Taylor, the Cincinnati Bengals current head coach, already on the hot seat? Heading into the 2021 season, is Zach Taylor already on the hot seat? Now, this is a very complicated question because here's the thing. When I saw Zach Taylor was being hired by the Cincinnati Bengals a couple of years ago, I had no idea who the guy was. I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. All I knew was he was a former college quarterback, and he learned under Sean McVay in 2017 when he was on Sean McVay's offensive staff. So I said, yeah, maybe this guy knows a little bit about offense, but I don't know much about this guy. However, last year in 2020, around December, when the Cowboys absolutely destroyed the Cincinnati Bengals, and that was without Joe Burrow, by the way. Joe Burrow was hurt at the time. I said, yep, it's time to fire Zach Taylor. It's time to rip the Band-Aid off. Because I said, listen, I understand that there's a lack of talent on this roster, but Ron Rivera, he inherited a pretty bad roster. He's winning games. You look at Brian Flores. People felt the Miami Dolphins had one of the worst rosters of recent memory a couple of years ago when Brian Flores took over. And Brian Flores didn't make excuses. He won games. You look at Joe Judge. I don't think the New York Giants were a very talented team last year. Joe Judge won 6 games. That's impressive considering the roster that he was dealt with in his first year in a COVID season. So, listen, I'm a guy that wants results. And I just didn't think Zach Taylor was producing enough results. And I thought to myself, what is Zach Taylor really good at? Because I don't think Zach Taylor is this offensive guru. I don't think he's a great defensive-minded head coach. I don't think he excels at anything. When you look at Andy Reid, he's a special offensive mind. Bill Belichick, a defensive-minded head coach, one of the best defensive-minded head coaches of all time. And listen, I just felt that I don't know if Zach Taylor's ceiling is all that high. And listen, if you're Cincinnati, eventually, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you're going to have to beat and out-coach Andy Reid, Belichick, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Kevin Stefanski, Sean McDermott, even Frank Wright. Frank Wright might be the 6th or 7th best coach in the AFC, and he's darn good. And we're not even talking about guys in the NFC like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. So, I just didn't really feel Zach Taylor last year. But after a while, they started to actually win a couple of games without Joe Burrow when Joe Burrow was hurt. I've always said, the testament to a great coach is when you can win games without a star quarterback. And the Cincinnati Bengals, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game without Joe Burrow, which is very impressive because I don't even know who the Bengals quarterback was at the time. I'm sorry for not doing the research, but I think most casual NFL fans didn't know who that guy was, and they even went on the road and beat Houston. I know Houston was a bad team last year, but Deshaun Watson's a real player. I felt it was an impressive win on the road. So Zach Taylor, to me, as a head coach last year, got better as the year went on, and even won despite Joe Burrow not playing some games. And we can talk about if Zach Taylor is the future or not. Here's the common denominator. The players have backed him up from day one. Joe Burrow has said multiple times he believes in the guy. Several other Cincinnati Bengals fans have endorsed Zach Taylor. And you can kind of tell when you can kind of tell when players are throwing coaches under the bus. You can tell when players are like, this guy's not very good. They kind of will give you a little sense. I don't have that sense with Joe Burrow. I truly believe that Joe Burrow and a lot of Cincinnati Bengals players believe in Zach Taylor. Okay? Now, to answer the real question, is he on the hot seat? I don't think so, because I think Cincinnati actually is really going to give him a fair shot to prove to them that he can be the coach of the future. Because Cincinnati, I think they're thinking to themselves, if we fire this guy Zach Taylor prematurely, then what message does that send to the rest of the coaching circle world? Because if you fire a coach after only 1 or 2 seasons, then that sends a message that you're a little bit impatient. And what coach is going to work with an organization that's not willing to be patient? The minute I start losing, this team is going to fire me. I think that coaches want to have stability, and they want to be given time to establish their culture and draft and bring in their guys. So I think Zach Taylor, as long as he doesn't completely stink up the joint this year, if he wins 5 or 6 games this year, I think his job is safe. I think that the Bengals are going to determine how good Zach Taylor is in 2022, because that'll be Joe Burrow's 3rd season, and that will actually be Zach Taylor's 4th season as the head coach in Cincinnati. And by year 3 and year 4, that's the period where we need to start seeing some results, okay? So next year, if the Bengals aren't a borderline playoff team, I think you have to fire Zach Taylor, because there is some talent on this roster. Joe Burrow's not an awful quarterback, okay? There are some coaches that would kill to have Joe Burrow as their quarterback, okay? So when it comes to Zach Taylor, there's just still a lot of unknowns. We don't know what he is. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, he's got to make me a believer. Right now, I'm just strictly in wait-and-see mode with Zach Taylor. I think the Bengals are as well, and we'll see how this plays out in Cincinnati. Several years ago, the Cleveland Browns were a laughingstock, okay? But right now, today, the Cleveland Browns are amongst some of the legitimate Super Bowl contenders currently in the NFL. It's pretty crazy to think about it. From where Cleveland was 10 years ago to where they are now, it's an incredible story. Now, I will admit, Cleveland has gotten a little lucky because they've been so bad for so long that they were able to stockpile all these draft picks. And if you're consistently drafting in the top 5 or top 10, you're going to eventually get players like Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward to be on your roster. So the Browns have gotten a little lucky, but I will say, you look at the Las Vegas Raiders. They've had a ton of draft picks over the past 3 or 4 seasons. And quite frankly, they've had some bad drafts. So you have to give the Cleveland Browns organization some credit for hitting on those draft picks. Just because you have a ton of draft picks, that doesn't mean jack you know what. Okay? You have to get good players. You have to hit on those draft picks, and you have to develop those players. And you have to give Cleveland credit. They've scouted and found talent, and they've developed that talent, okay? And I have to say, Andrew Berry is a really good general manager. A lot of people had questions about Andrew Berry when he was hired by the Cleveland Browns because he was a guy that was hired within. At the time, he was the youngest general manager in all football. But he has made me a believer, man, because he has hit on his draft picks. He's addressed the Cleveland Browns' holes in free agency every single year. He hired Kevin Stefanski, who to me is a legitimate head coach. I'm a believer in Andrew Berry. And Andrew Berry is already one of the best young general managers in all football. He's done an excellent job. And the Cleveland Browns have built an incredible Super Bowl caliber roster. This roster is definitely a Super Bowl caliber roster, and it's incredibly talented, okay? And we're heading into the 2021 season. And let me just say this right now. If Cleveland over the next 4 to 5 seasons doesn't win a Super Bowl, it's a disappointment. And by the way, I'm not even going to blame the organization. I'm going to blame the players because this organization has put together an all-star cast of great players. Okay, you look at Baker Mayfield. Is Baker Mayfield an elite quarterback? No, he's not, but Baker Mayfield's pretty darn good. A lot of teams would love to have Baker Mayfield as their quarterback right now. 2 of Baker Mayfield's 3 seasons have been successful. And the 1 year he wasn't successful, it was because the head coach was awful, the offensive line was bad, and he got in over his head a little bit. He had a little bit of a sophomore slump, but Baker Mayfield's on track once again. I think Baker Mayfield has a chance to be a really good quarterback. I actually argued for him to be potentially the first overall pick in Cleveland. They actually took him with the first overall pick, and I think that they picked him over guys like Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold because they saw that he had that it factor, a little bit something special that those guys didn't have. And while you would have loved to have potentially maybe had Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, 2 quarterbacks that are a little bit more physically gifted than Baker, I think that Cleveland is completely fine with where they are because they won a playoff game last year. They were in the playoffs just like Baltimore and Buffalo. So I think they feel very good about Baker going forward. I think Baker Mayfield, the sky's the limit for him. He can become a really good franchise quarterback. You look at Nick Chubb. I think he's the closest thing to Marshawn Lynch in today's NFL. He's a very powerful runner with very, very good speed as well. You look at Kareem Hunt. He's a great running back. The wide receiver core is off the charts with Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashod Higgins. They drafted Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn, who's an absolute burner. The Cleveland Browns' third best tight end is David Njoku. And David Njoku could be a starting tight end on a handful of NFL teams. Definitely, no doubt about it. I'd argue Cleveland has the best offensive line in all football. Their defensive line is loaded with Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Malik Jackson, and they have a ton of depth behind those guys as well. They got 4, 5, 6 guys that can come in and just give them meaningful snaps because a lot of those guys could be starting caliber players on most other football teams. And the secondary is really good. And that secondary has come a long way because last year, Cleveland's secondary just wasn't all that great. You know, they had a poor back end. But they've addressed those issues. Obviously, you have Denzel Ward, but Greg Newsome is a really good player out of Northwestern that I believe in. They added Troy Hill. They added John Johnson. Grant Delpit comes off of injury. I mean, that secondary is loaded. And linebacker is a little bit of a question, but Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame, he's a real player that can make a lot of plays. I believe he was a steal in the draft. You have Mac Wilson and Jacob Phillips, who are decent players, you know, but you look at Cleveland's roster, where's the true weakness? They don't have a true weakness, okay? And outside the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are the defending Super Bowl champions, I'd argue Cleveland has the best roster in all football. I really do firmly believe that. I think Cleveland, top to bottom, actually has a better roster than Kansas City. I would say Kansas City might be the better football team just because Patrick Mahomes is so great that he kind of tips the scale in your favor. But I could see a situation where Cleveland knocks off Kansas City. They are built to beat any team in the league. They can pound the rock running the football. They can air the ball out with deep passes from Baker Mayfield to Odell Beckham Jr. or Donovan Peoples-Jones. They can shred you underneath with those tight ends. They have a really talented defense. I mean, Cleveland's talent is off the charts. I think Cleveland has an incredible roster, and the organization deserves a ton of credit for building this all-star cast of players, no doubt about it. I now want to shift back to Baker Mayfield because I think Baker Mayfield is back on track as a quarterback. I think Baker Mayfield is here to stay for good. Because here's the thing, Baker Mayfield came into the NFL with a lot of hype, and during his rookie season, he lived up to that hype. He, at the time, broke the rookie touchdown pass record, which has since been broken by Justin Herbert. But the bottom line is Baker Mayfield, he had an all-time great rookie season. So, rookie season, he was great. The team improved tremendously. They went from 0-16 to winning 7 games. Then, you know, in the offseason, the team adds Odell Beckham Jr., there's high expectations. And unfortunately, Baker Mayfield, he played pretty poorly. He was a guy that a lot of people accused of, filming too much commercials during that offseason. He was also coming out speaking about Daniel Jones, Sam Ehlinger. He was in the headlines for a lot of different reasons, a lot of reasons that you don't want your franchise quarterback being in the headlines for. I don't hear Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or even Deshaun Watson talking about what Sam Ehlinger is doing, what Daniel Jones is doing. Like Baker Mayfield, it was just a lot of stupid stuff. And let's be real, he didn't play well his sophomore season, okay? But a big reason why is because the coaching staff was incompetent and the offensive line was pretty bad. And Baker, he just didn't play well. But you have to give Baker Mayfield a lot of credit because this past year, he showed me a lot. He showed me that he can run an NFL-style system and be a guy that fits within that system. And he's a guy that is mature enough to be a long-term franchise quarterback. Baker was saying all the right things all year. He was a great leader. He took it upon himself to get better and be well coached. He came into training camp in better shape, a little bit more slimmed down, and he had a pretty solid season. Granted, the team was more of a run-first team this year, but I think that Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, they're only scratching the surface because this was a COVID year where there was a lot of turmoil in the offseason. A lot of people thought teams were going to struggle, and Baker Mayfield, he put together a pretty good season. Even won a playoff game, He had his most consistent and most efficient season up to date. This was the most consistent we've seen Baker Mayfield be in his NFL career. He had his high moments, he had his low moments, but for the most part, Baker Mayfield, from a week-to-week basis, you knew what you were going to get. And I think from this point going forward, Baker Mayfield is going to regain his confidence. I believe in the team that he has surrounding him. I believe in the player because I think the arm strength is real. I think the mobility is underrated. I think that this guy just has a little special sauce. At Oklahoma, you saw this guy had the swagger. He had the it factor. I really do believe in Baker Mayfield. I do. I think that he could become a really good quarterback. And I think that Baker Mayfield falling flat on his face in the sophomore season, that might have been one of the best things to happen to him because it humbled him. It made him realize, hey, I need to work harder. I need to do more things to become the long-term franchise quarterback. And if Baker Mayfield keeps this up, he's going to get generational wealth. He's going to get paid a ton of money. And I believe Baker Mayfield can be the guy that leads the Cleveland Browns to their first Super Bowl championship. The Cleveland Browns have never won a Super Bowl title. I think Baker Mayfield can be that guy. I think he has ice water in his veins. He showed me in the playoffs that he can be a good playoff performer. He outplayed Ben Roethlisberger, a Hall of Fame quarterback, in the playoffs. And if it were not for a couple of bad breaks on the road versus Kansas City, Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns could have knocked off Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I think that eventually things will break their way in the playoffs. They have a real coaching staff. They have a great team. I think Baker's only scratching the surface. He will only get better. And I think Baker Mayfield is here to stay. He's going to be consistent going forward. And I believe in Baker Mayfield, definitely, no doubt about it. I've said that in the past, but I'm going to say it again. That's how I feel. So last but not least, I'm going to end the show by giving my official AFC North prediction for the 2021 season. This could be subject to change over the next couple of weeks if there are some injuries that were to happen. Like if Lamar Jackson were to get injured, it's going to change some of my off-season predictions and things like that. I hope no one gets hurt and that I can just be constant with these things and be consistent. But right now, today, heading into the 2020 season, I believe the Cleveland Browns are going to win the AFC North. I do think Baltimore is a real threat to win the division. However, I will say I think Cleveland has the more complete and more talented roster and a competent coaching staff as well. Lamar Jackson is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, but I do think that Baker Mayfield has a more talented roster. The Ravens have some questions regarding their offensive line, a couple of moving parts on defense, and they're going to be installing a whole new offensive system to a certain degree because they went out and went big on wide receiver. They added Sammy Watkins. They added Rashod Bateman. They drafted Taylor Wallace. And that's all cool and dandy. but it takes time to implement those guys into your system and get a new kind of offensive philosophy going. So I think there will be some growing pains despite Baltimore being a more talented football team than they were last year. Whereas Cleveland, they already kind of went through their growing pains a year ago when they had to bring in a new head coach and implement some new things in an offseason where there was the coronavirus and things like that. And they actually handled it pretty well. They won 11 games last year. I think Cleveland has the most talented roster in all football outside of Tampa Bay. They're going to be able to run the football effectively. They have star wide receivers, the best offensive line in all football, a great defense full of a lot of great playmakers. I think that some weeks they're just going to maul opponents because the talent is so overwhelmingly really, really good. Now, I will say Cleveland does have to go on the road to face the Patriots. They will have to go on the road to face Green Bay. They will have to go on the road to face Minnesota, as well as Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. All those games are tough road games, but I do think that they can, kind of win a couple of those games. I think that they can potentially beat New England. I think they're better than Minnesota. I think they're better than Pittsburgh. I think they'll probably split with Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So they'll probably go 500 they'll probably go 500 in those road games that are really big on their schedule. But overall, I think the schedule's manageable. I think the roster's loaded. I think this is the year that Cleveland is on top in the AFC North. I don't quite trust the Steelers. I think the Steelers take a step back, potentially with Ben Roethlisberger's age and him potentially regressing. I don't quite trust their offensive line. I think Pittsburgh is talented, but not as talented as Baltimore and Cleveland. And while the Bengals have a real quarterback in Joe Burrow, I do still believe they are a rebuilding team. I have questions about their offensive line and their coaching staff, and I just think Cincinnati is a couple of years away from being taken serious. So I had the Cleveland Browns winning the AFC North in 2021, and I very well could see the Cleveland Browns in the Super Bowl, no doubt about it. This is a Super Bowl caliber roster, and I expect them to win their division in 2021. This could be the year of the Cleveland Browns. We shall see, but I do believe they'll win the AFC North in 2021. Well, everyone, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. This was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun making the notes for this episode and talking with you guys. Have a God bless day. Stay safe, and I'm Ghost. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juiciest Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big-time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juiciest Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.